Welcome to the Inspiration North podcasts, inspiring stories from inspirational people and how they found their passion, their true north. I'm James Eves.
And I'm Michelle Minikin, and this is the Inspiration North podcast.
Today's episode, Thriving Through Adversity with Martin Gillespie. We talk about using his stage 4 cancer to become a better person, his mum knitting him a jumper to stay warm in Australia, and being known as the Bud Stud.
Martin is a holistic coach with a focus on the well-being of men, ditching the corporate blazer after 25 years to become a trailblazer in wellness, growth, and developing into an empathetic human. Martin addresses his purpose of combining nutrition, meditation, epigenetics, and questioning the programmed mindset. He is a resilient, charismatic, and successful strategic leader, having overcome mental challenges, including personal trauma and healing from cancer.
I was going to say good morning to you, Martin, but it's obviously good evening in Australia. How are you?
Look, I'm great, James, and I feel really privileged at being on your podcast. As you can hear, I've got a great Australian accent all the way from Glasgow. And I've had an incredible, beautiful day and last couple of days, and it's just a great time to be alive.
It's awesome with the powers of technology that we can speak to you.
Look, I think it's fantastic that, many years ago, a Scotsman invented a telephone, and this is just an advancement. So now we have a community, and we have to thank my lovely little country of origin for bringing that to the world.
Then again, you also are slightly responsible for Donald Trump as well. So
can we edit that out, please?
Go on then.
So if we kick off with the first question, when you were a little boy, did you know what you wanted to be when you grew up?
I always wanted to be in business, if that makes sense. I grew up in, if you want to call it, a middle-class background in Glasgow. My father was an accountant. My mum was a stay-at-home mum at that time. I was one of 5 kids. From the age of 8, 9, I was always trying to work out how I could do chores to get some money. And then about 11, 12, I started delivering newspapers. Unfortunately, if anybody's under the age of 25 listening to this, they won't know what a newspaper is, but that's how we earned our 10 pence here or 15 pence, and it accumulated up. So I did a paper round for, I think, about 4 years. And it was fantastic. That meant that you, as you're going through your youthful years, you had a bit of coin, you had a bit of money. And I always had this sort of entrepreneurial flair. Later on, I started a couple of businesses, etc. Were they successful? No, they were really good fun though.
So what did you take the money from the paper round and then reinvest that into another little business, or
I did? No, so I did my paper round, and this was back in, when did I leave school? 88 in Glasgow. Now, if you recall, in 1988, Glasgow was the city of culture. 1990 was the city of culture. It was the Garden Festival. So Glasgow had this amazing energy. People were coming back to Glasgow from overseas to retrace their heritage. And I was really lucky. I went from delivering newspapers to becoming a front hall porter in a city centre hotel. Mm-hmm. And from that, a couple of really kind people took me under their wings, taught me how to serve tables, how to silver service was in the day of, having 25 plates on your arm type of thing. So it was another way of getting money, if that makes sense. I used that money to invest in my education. I got my first degree in hotel management, which I studied in the coldest place on the planet called Aberdeen. That cold that the polar bears come in at winter because they're too cold. But I have to say, one of the best places in your 20s, when you're hungover, you go outside, you walk around the block, you feel fantastic after it because it's that cold. And while I was going to uni there, I was so typical Scottish that I would walk to university in the snow because seeing the bus driver petrified driving along the main streets of Aberdeen, and I'm going, I could save £5 in my pocket so I can have a couple of beers, or I get the bus. I'm walking. So it toughened you up a good bit. So, that kind of laws of economics. And then I got my first degree and I went to London. I was working in London as a night manager in a hotel. So it was early 20s. And I went, I don't want to work in hotels anymore. The glamour had kind of gone. My motivation for doing it was I was a big Basil Fawlty fan, Fawlty Towers. And also when I was a child, going back to your original question, James, when I was a child and we would go on holiday to small hotels, and I was always obsessed with the sign that says private or employees only. What happens behind the scenes to make this work out front? So that brought me into hotel management. But as you know, you work 27 hours a day and get paid for 12, right? And that lifestyle wasn't really conducive for me. So I had money in the bank and I decided to study international marketing at Strathclyde University. And this was in 94. There were only 3 people from Scotland on the course of 45 people. So it was the first time I'd really engaged, dare I say it, I'd travelled a bit in the world, but it was the first time I'd engaged with a lot of different nationalities, all driving for the same focus. And it was fantastic. So we had people from all over the world, and I managed to get my master's degree. But what the natural non-English speaking people would say to us, all us the 3 Scottish boys, you do all the presentations because your English is better than ours. And I'm going, yeah, of course it is. So that sort of led me into a lot of more public speaking. So again, I found that was a different skill to learn. So when you're in your 20s and you're learning that and not being afraid to stand up in front of an audience and just let it be. And I've made some disastrous presentations, but I've also nailed a couple, and you feel proud when you come off stage and you go, that. But again, my commercial mind, I left university with my master's degree and I got the dream job. I got the job promoting an American beer to Scottish people.
Look at this alcohol in it.
Driving around pubs and clubs promoting a certain beer product. Not sure if you want me to mention it, but it was in the 90s, it was Budweiser beer.
Yeah.
Right? So locally, you became known as the Bud Stud, right? So you knew all the guys who were selling all the spirits. You got access to all the bars you could think of. So you had this decadent lifestyle, if that makes sense.
Mm.
You were doing your work between 6 at night and 2 in the morning.
You're like the Duff Man.
It was, but you had that. You were fearless, and I remember actually driving the car one morning thinking, "This is stupid." You've not had enough sleep. You're not doing the right thing. But doing it, I was back living in Aberdeen at the time, and again, this sort of flashback came to me about why I first studied hotel management. I was really interested when people go out onto the oil rigs in the north of Scotland. You can't drink and you can't smoke. You've got to feed them good food to get the right productivity. But if you recall, in the late 80s and 90s, it was very scientific orientated. Or I had to go and do another degree on nutrition. I was like, I don't want to do this. I want to really understand. If you feed people properly in their core, which is the middle part of your human body, your body will be aligned. So I kind of felt there was an awakening at that point. But I was so transfixed with, I want a job title, I want a car. In my late 20s, I'm driving around in a BMW, I'm earning a whack load of money. I thought I was the cat's pajamas, or what is it, yuppies? Remember them? And we were partying all the time. We thought we were fantastic. And then that brought me, I was working for Budweiser. I went to a recruitment company and said, look, I'm looking for another job. And they said, look, we're looking for someone to run a business unit for us. And it's accountants. Now, I grew up with accountants. My father was one. My uncle's one, my sister's one, my brother's one, my sister-in-law's one. Really exciting people. Have you ever gone to a party full of Scottish accountants?
Sadly not.
Fabulous. You know, just don't get them to do double entry. Then you're leaving quickly. So I accepted the role and I ran a contracting business for this recruitment business. And two of my major clients were Diageo, which was Guinness, and National Australia Bank. And that started planting the seeds for me to come out to Australia. I was on conference calls with Melbourne regularly because it was a consolidation of 4 major banks in the UK into a model called a shared service model. And that was going to be in Glasgow. It was my job to recruit accountants. And anybody that could put 2 and 2 together got a job there. And it was, again, you were on this trajectory. It was a hell of a lot of fun. And I put my hand up. I was late 20s at the time, put my hand up and said, I would like to go. I initially wanted to go to New York, but getting visas for New York is extremely difficult. Getting visas for Australia when you're under certain criteria is actually quite easy for UK people. They got me the visa. And I remember going to my parents, and I went one Saturday night with, a couple of bottles of Australian and New Zealand wine. Dad was cooking dinner, and I was like, what do you think of the wine? He goes, it's okay. He was, if it wasn't French wine, he didn't really care. He's like, it's quite light. It's this. I said, it's from Australia. Yep, nothing. I said, I've accepted a position. I'm moving to Australia in 2 months' time. And my mum, God bless her, knitted me a jumper to take to Australia because she thought I would be cold coming here in the middle of winter in July. To this day, I still have it. I can't give it away. It's got too much emotion in it for me. She must have drank too much Australian wine because the arms on it are like Popeye, but going that way rather than that way. I should have worn it for this presentation, actually.
You have to send pictures with it on.
Yes, it might not be a bad thing. I can go and find it. But that brought me to Oz. And my original plan to come to Australia was I had a 4-year working visa, which is, again, quite a common thing for Brits. And I was here for about 18 months and I struggled emotionally just to feel settled because everything else is different. A lot of things are different here. We have, in the UK, you go to one supermarket, you can buy everything. You go to one supermarket, and then you have to go to the equivalent of an OV license to get alcohol. Transport system, I had no idea. I didn't know how to drive. I didn't have a car. In hindsight, I made a couple of mistakes. And my advice to people if they move country and if they're single, live with someone. I lived on my own. So to get that social network was quite a challenge. And I didn't travel to the other side of the world to spend my days with Poms, for God's sake, right? I wanted to meet Australians. And what was lucky, a passion of mine, I'm a runner. I'm a long distance runner. And somebody in my organization said, oh, look, there's this running group and it's based just north of the Harbour Bridge. And for me, that was my escapism. That was my passion to go, I can meet people a couple of nights a week, train with them. I don't care what job you've got. And lo and behold, there was a group of us, all about the same age. We were all single, keeping fit. We would run on a Saturday, go out for some beers on a Saturday night, and bike ride on a Sunday. So it was just this collectiveness. And it was mixed. It was boys and girls. So, if the girls were getting chatted up with some boy in a pub, we would go over and put our arm round so that the boy would disappear. The girls would try and do that with us, but we were so shallow-minded. If we were thinking we were getting lucky, we would just take the girl home, right? So we had this real, fun, almost like being back at university again. And then during that time, I actually met someone. I was training to race in Boston. I'd qualified for the Boston Marathon. And I met this girl, Kelly, who was part of the running group. And we started dating. And then at the end of that year, we ended up living together. And then 2 years later, got married. So that was 2006. I became a citizen in 2007. So I now have a British citizenship and an Australian citizenship, which was a really proud moment to say, this is where I'm staying. This is my roots. I want to stay in Australia now. Because I was always quite unsettled when you don't have, I'm not saying you need to be codependent, but when you're kind of going, oh, I'm not sure, when you put your roots down, you feel much more settled. So that made me feel much more settled. And then we had our first child in 2007. Ava popped out, and we were really worried, to share very openly here. We were really worried because Kelly was a runner as well and doing lots of sport. We were hitting late 30s, having our first child. And as a man, I was a little bit worried, thinking, what happens if I can't have children? I'm bike riding 10, 15 hours a week. I'm running. Am I doing the right thing for my body? So I had to slow down a little bit, if that makes sense. Look at my diet, what I was eating. You know yourself, when you're in relationships, it's very easy. You open a bottle of wine when you're cooking dinner, even if it's a Tuesday night, and you kind of go, all right, okay, so we put all those in place so that we could have children. And it was the best thing we could do. We still maintained our fitness, but I also, at that time, I started meditating, so did Kelly. And we also started going to yoga. Kelly took it up when pregnant yoga, and I took it up as a blog. And it was quite weird. You would walk into a yoga studio and it would be 30 females and me. And I'm thinking, I'm married, sugar. I should be out here, right? But it was, and it's taken, that yoga has been a real journey of mine, because every day you do yoga, you don't compete against yourself. You're actually working with yourself. And that's been a brilliant, and to this day, I'm still doing it. And I'll come back to it in a few minutes. So 2007, Ava was born. 2009, my second daughter, Amelia, was born. And then in 2010, the wheels started falling off. My parents had come over. And then 6 weeks later, my mother passed away from heart disease. She was only 68. We're a very west of Scotland mentality. Every weekend was a roll in black pudding. Diet was pretty poor. Almost really kind of ignorant of her own health. Always putting her children before herself. So she died in 2010, April 2010. At the time, I flew home, and for those who have unfortunately have to do this mercy flight, it's a hellish flight back. You're emotionally a mess. And I flew back, and at that stage, I had a younger sister. She'd been diagnosed 2 years before my mum passed away with a thing called inflammatory breast cancer. Now, inflammatory breast cancer is cancer of the layers of skin on your muscle tissue of your breast. It's very aggressive. She was given a sentence of 5 years. She was lucky she was a nurse, so she knew she had a brilliant ecosystem around her. But I went back for my mum's funeral, and in typical Scottish female humour, I went to give her a hug, and she said, "Oh, Martin, hug me on this end. That's my false boob. I want to feel you in my real boob." Mum's coffin's lying there. She's giving it. Denise, this is so wrong, but that humour is something that to this day I still kind of miss. That quick-witted, you guys have got it in Newcastle, and Scottish humour it's fantastic as well. So Mum died, and then a year later, my parents were married 43 years. We discovered that my father had a mistress for 35 of those years. And I actually have another brother in Scotland. So my natural emotion was one of extreme anger with my father. So much so that he would try and contact me, he would try and write to me, and I would refuse. Right. And I actually, in hindsight, when I came back to Australia after Mum's died and hearing this, I was not strong enough in myself emotionally because of the programming I had to reach out and get some help. And that's when I was needing some help. My family was in Scotland. I had a couple of mates here. Don't get me wrong. I'm trying to be a father. There were kind of holes in my marriage as well, if that makes sense. 2 young kids. You're on that Groundhog Day, that treadmill. And I didn't sit and say, I'm struggling. I need some help. I can look at it now, and I should have, but to be a man at that stage was deal with it, right? And that very sort of Anglo-Saxon mentality just toughen up, or as they say over here in Australia, toughen up, princess. And you go, that's not the right way. So that was 2011, we found out that. And then 2012, in April of 2012, my sister lost a battle with breast cancer. She was 37. I managed to get back to Glasgow to see her passing away about 12 hours beforehand. And what I found was extremely beautiful was, one, it was a physical closure, and two, just to be with my family as well, because I didn't see that with my mum. She passed and you see the dead body, but just to be able to hold your sister and say, thanks for being my sister, you know, have a party with mum in heaven, love you, you know, but you had that connectedness. But at that stage, and I'll be very transparent here, at that stage, I remember being in Sydney Airport and my now ex-mother-in-law called me and said, if you get on that flight, your marriage is over. You cannot bring your sister back to life. Why are you going back to Scotland? So I was having this turmoil of my family in Scotland needing me, my immediate family, my wife and kids, and my in-laws not agreeing to going over there. And I was in turmoil, if that makes sense.
Mm.
So I went over. I think I spent more time up in the air because, as you know, it takes about 2 days to fly, 24 hours each way. Got there, seen Denise passing away. I was so exhausted. I didn't go and see my father. One of the things Denise, my sister, had said, I don't want Dad at the funeral. Please respect my wishes. Which was very brave of her. But again, in hindsight, you kind of go, well, who was your dad? And as a father myself, you want that forgiveness. But I couldn't do it. You honour that dying wish.
Mm.
I flew back to Scotland, seen Denise passing away, came back to Australia. There were holes in our marriage. We had bought a house at the time. And one of the things that I got carried away with was being a people pleaser. And we were doing renovations to the house with one income, 2 kids. I felt a lot of pressure on my chest, and I couldn't communicate because I'd lost the communication. My ex-wife was angry with me, and she wouldn't allow me to. I wasn't strong enough to communicate. Thought I was getting over it. So Denise died in April, and then we're getting back into some kind of level of normality. And then 6 weeks later, I got a phone call. There's been an incident at the family house in Glasgow that my father had fallen off he'd gone onto a wall, 6-foot wall, fell off the wall, and he had a pair of garden secateurs in his top pocket. And as he fell, the secateurs pierced him in the heart, and he bled to death. He was 69. He managed to crawl for about 10 meters and then just lay back. So although I was very angry with him, I'm saddened to know that he suffered such a horrific death. I mean, that's almost barbaric type of dying. At least in some ways, he wasn't in any pain because it would have happened so quickly. When that happened, there was a lot of emotion going through my head. And at that point, I needed help. I went and got some help. But my wife had already taken a step out to say that the marriage was over. So when I needed, I'm not saying from a codependent person, but when you're in a partnership, in a relationship with someone, you have those vows for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. I was struggling mentally, but I didn't know. I went to get some help. And we have this thing over here called a mental health plan that you can get from the government. You go to your GP and you get subsidized clinical psychologists, and they cover 80%. So you're out of pocket for 20%. And that's when I realized I needed some help. I was fatigued, but having 2 young kids and just on that treadmill of life, I was also one of the crazy things in this country. I'd taken on a large job that covered New Zealand to Perth. So it takes 5 hours to travel to Perth. It takes 4 hours to travel to New Zealand. So I threw myself into work. Typical avoidance of emotion. When you would go there, you're with a couple of mates, you're having some beers, you're not sleeping that well, you're perpetuating this cycle. And then when you come back to the family unit, you think everything can be rosy. And it wasn't. And at that point, I went to the doctors, and actually I went to the dentist. I felt a lump under my neck. And And, as I'm shaving every morning, Michelle, as you put makeup on every morning, you kind of go, oh, I've got this, and you check. And your lymph nodes, your lymphatic nervous system, your lymph nodes are the size of your fingernails. I had one the size of a lemon in my neck, and I could push it in and out during the day. So that kicks off a series of investigations, medical investigations. Anything to do with blood also has to be tested for HIV and AIDS, because that's obviously a blood disease. Mm-hmm. My marriage is collapsing. I went to my ex-wife and said, I'm getting tested for HIV and AIDS. Well, that's like giving, grenade over. So Dr. Google, if you've given the girls HIV and AIDS, I'll never, forgive you, etc. So I went for a few more tests, and then emotionally it started hitting me when they said, you have to go for a biopsy. We're not sure what you have to do, what it is. So they wouldn't take it from my neck because it would be a permanent scar. So they took it from my pubic area. So jokingly, before we came on camera, you were joking about the fact that my country is semi-responsible for Donald Trump. I had my own Donald Trump happening in areas that only certain people could see. So when I was in the hospital for what should have just been a really simple procedure, my body shut down. That's when I just froze. And I started crying. I started opening up, going, I'm really sick. We didn't know what it was, but we knew that you're not going to spend that amount of investigation to get things. So this was on a Thursday. I went home, and you can't sleep. You're just on edge because you know that you've been poked and prodded, and you've got medication in you, you've got Band-Aids on you. You're just lost, if that makes sense. And I was staying at a cousin's place, so I couldn't see my kids because I felt dirty. That was a Thursday. I got a phone call on the Monday. Okay, Martin, you need to write everything down that we're about to tell you. We believe you have stage 2 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And as soon as he said that, I knew it was cancer. So wrote everything down, told me what I would do, said, you'll get a phone call in 10 minutes. This will activate X, Y, and Z. Came off the phone. First thing I did, cried. Second thing, Dr. Google. Third thing, cried. Fourth thing, Dr. Google. I was spaced out, if that makes sense. Mm. I called my ex-wife at the time and said, look, I've got an appointment with a hematologist. I'd never heard of the word hematologist. And if the 14 letters of the word were allowed in Scrabble, it would be a fantastic word to use. Mm. So I went in, and I had to persuade my ex-wife to come along with me. And he said, Martin, we've made a mistake. So you're thinking you've got cancer. We've made a mistake. You don't have stage 2. You have stage 4. So I had inflamed lymph nodes. Stage 1 would have just been from your neck upwards. Stage 2 from your diaphragm upwards. Stage 3 all over your body. Stage 4 is in all over your body and in one or more vital organs. I had stage 4. My bone marrow, which I discovered is your second biggest organ in your body, had cancer. So every white blood cell being produced had cancer. 25 years ago, I would be dead. And thanks to modern technology, modern medicine, and dare I say it, modern epigenetics, that I believe that this can be cured. And I'm living proof of that. I went through 2.5 years. So my hematologist, I burst into tears when he told me. And he said, Martin, you're going to see a psychologist tomorrow. And I'd seen a couple and just sort of began to sort of feel comfortable at, the questioning, the probing, changing my mindset. I'm 41 at the time. I'd never really got any help, any professional help, because I'm a bloke, I'm Scottish bloke, I'm stoic. My surname's not Google, but it's close enough. It's Gillespie. You think you know the answers, but asking for help is so powerful. Mm-hmm. But then that prejudice was playing funny buggers with me, if you want to call it that, going, I don't need to see a psych, right? Went to see a psychologist, and the psychologist was fantastic. She said, welcome to your new life. And that, to this day, resonates with me. My old life that the universe had put out to me was dead. Cancer has saved my life. and hopefully I'm not offending any listener on this. This is my journey that's affected me. I'm thankful for what cancer has given to me. It's given me the opportunity to actually be a better person. But it's been one hell of a journey. I've had some highs and lows and some aspects where you kind of go, what am I doing? So I endured 2 years of 8 rounds of chemotherapy every 2 weeks and 2 years of drugs. And for those who don't know, when you receive chemotherapy, the cycle I was on was known as day 1 was your chemotherapy. Day 3, I had to inject myself with a booster to boost my immune system. I was petrified. So you kept this little syringe in your fridge. So every time you open the fridge door, this syringe is going, hello, hello, and you've got to inject into your tummy. Now, I've never injected anything anywhere. It took me about 20 minutes while the nurses just whack it in, boom. But one of the funny things, one of the drugs, and they tell you all of this when you're going through it, but you've got chemo brain, which is like baby brain, goes in one ear, out the other. One of the drugs was a red colour, a bit like Santa's suit that he's got on behind you. So it's obviously injected into you. It's got to come through you. So I would take my cannula with me, go to the bathroom, and I would pass this red thing through my manhood. I thought my manhood had broken because I'm seeing this red stuff coming through. And I would come out and the nurses would just look at me and go, I said, my willy's broken. And a really Billy Connolly kind of voice. And they're going, you're an idiot. Sit down, take some more drugs. So I was really scared. And I didn't have a significant partner that can look after you. I remember going home that night after my first session of chemotherapy that took about 10 hours. And I could feel, it was almost like feeling monsters going through my body. And I was lying in bed in tears and thinking, I'm going to die. You know, I was really, really scared. And I hadn't had the side effects until about 3 days later. Then I'm quite a hairy kind of guy because, again, being Scottish, if you grow chest hair, it keeps you warm in winter. Mm-hmm. So I put my hand on my chest and this big cluster of hair came out. And when you start losing your body hair and my hair in my head started coming out, I kind of lost that. My happiness went downwards, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. You become a victim. You become sick. You feel ill. You look terrible. And this was also the middle of summer here in Australia, where we endure some days at 40 degrees. So I would have to try and get some vitamin D from the sun and go for walks and whatnot. And I love being at the beach, but I would have to cover myself like a condom, basically all over my body, because I had no immune system. My immune system was depleted. At one point, I had a thing called peripheral neuropathy. And for those who are not medical, that is pins and needles in your fingers. I could not hold a knife to chop vegetables. My kids were young. I couldn't play Lego with my kids because I couldn't have the skills. I was working full time and that kept me going. Again, going back to that male masculine energy. If I could keep working, then I feel I'm doing something. So again, I made the conscious effort of things like I wasn't going to fly for 2 years. I can do everything remotely and I can delegate. And some of my work colleagues, I gave the keys to my apartment when I was in hospital and they would fill my fridge up with food. So when I said I had no carers, I had a team of people around me that would help. And that was beautiful. But yes, there was some loneliness. And again, having a Scottish disposition, my hematologist said to me, Martin, the night before chemotherapy, why don't you drink a glass or 2 of red wine to calm yourself down? He said, and if you are, drink Pinot Noir because it's got more antioxidants. I tried to put my wine bill through as a medical expense in my tax return here, but because I didn't buy my accountant enough wine that year, she refused to do it. But you're kind of lost, if that makes sense. And so day 3, I would inject. Day 4, 5, and 6, I would be taking between 30 and 40 different medications. If you turn me upside down, I was like Boots on steroids, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And I was really scared. Again, going back to yoga, I would practice about 3-4 times a week. And it meant that I could go into a hot room. The teachers were beautiful. I could sweat some of this toxins out of me. And I remember one time I had no eyebrows, and I realized what eyebrows are for. So I'm in this hot vinyasa studio, and I couldn't see a thing. I couldn't see what was left or right, what was doing. I just lay down on the mat, cracked up laughing, and went, this is what it's about. You need to have more laughter in life. So I bounced through it by listening and seeking at regular times a lot of professional help. And that is still ongoing as well. I've come through it a stronger person. My next key goal was, I started my first chemotherapy actually 8 years ago this weekend. So the day before my birthday, started first chemo. I was hospitalized a couple of times because I did some really stupid things. Like my first session of chemo on day 3, after injecting my tummy, I went and ran 6 kilometers. Then 2 days later, did the same thing. My body shut down. And for those who can't do number 2s, and being Scottish, I can sometimes be full of number 2s. Not being able to do that for 3 days is not fun. So, lesson learned. Again, I've said a few times about being at the ocean. So for me, getting up early in the morning, going to the ocean, trying just to get your feet into it, jump through the waves for 10, 15 minutes, energized me. So one of the things that worked for me through my chemo journey, as I was getting stronger, if that makes sense, and accepting that this was my standard medical path, I would get up early in the morning, drive down to the Sydney Harbour Bridge, which is beautiful, walk over it and back. So I was so tired at getting chemo, I would fall asleep during it. And it worked for me. So again, the nurses would come and bring big towels, warm towels, put them around me. But one of my best mates came to see me, and he walked into the chemo ward, said, I'm here to see Martin Gillespie, and said, that's Martin over there. I went, can't be, he looks too ill. And I didn't realize how ill I looked, right? Again, I started flicking back into my brain about what I was saying there, looking at what food, and food is medicine, let medicine be thy food, right? So I started studying nutritional environmental medicine, throwing out all the plastic containers, throwing out my microwave, right? Because I was getting enough drugs in me. I've had more than $500,000 worth of drugs pumped into me. And again, thankfully I'm an Australian, because if not, I would have had to pay this or gone back to the UK, and started changing my lifestyle. And one of the great things is I've got a very good relationship with my hematologist. That my goal was to get to the 5-year mark. If you're a cancer patient, you want to, it's still, you're a cancer patient. When mentally you hit that milestone, you're a thriver. And the power of language from patient, survivor to thriver is something I've worked really hard with a team of people around me to change that mentality. I'm thriving with cancer. There is an 80% chance that this will relapse, and there is a protocol you go through. But I mentioned there about epigenetics. So things like connecting, dance, yoga, getting toxicity out of your life. And, we spoke earlier about also getting toxic relationships out of your life. They've served you for that chapter. Move on. It might be hard initially, but it wasn't meant to be. And that's been quite a challenging aspect. Going through chemo, I was also going through what we call here in Australia, I was going through a divorce and family court. And I went through a 3-year battle with my ex-wife through the family court. And that bled me dry of any type of financial savings, if that makes sense. And then I was getting this, it feels weird, this kind of calling going, you are no longer needed in the corporate environment. And 18 months ago, we had a thing in the company I was with, Are You Okay Day. So I gave a kind of small presentation like this, and the message is, especially, it doesn't matter if you're male or female, there are processes here that if you're struggling, don't struggle in silence. Reach out, get some help. And from that, within a 2-week period, over 30 people came to me. And I'm going, yeah, the universe is telling me you've got to pivot. And I took my nutritional medicine to a next level, and I qualified in it. So I remember doing a 4-day course, and I was the only non-medic in the room. And, one of the things that I've empowered in myself is I'm good enough being me. But these were all, I'm GP here, I'm this, I'm this. I said, I'm a GP, I'm general public. I'm interested in this because I want to learn. And the ironic thing is, on the weekend, I was appointed to the board as a board advisor to teach medical practitioners about good health. And it's, things happen for a reason. So completely stoked about that. And I've now given up a 25-year career in corporate world to set up my own holistic coaching business, especially for men, because men in society, I believe, are lost. I've shared some of my story and quite emotional, but we're lost because we're programmed to think we can fix it. We are the fixers. And one of the kind of offshot projects I'm running is the men's circle, where in my local community, I've involved the community, going back to the adage of it takes a village to bring up a kid. It takes a community to bring up human beings, regardless if they're male or female. I'm going to be quite sexist here. Females are a little bit better at being in touch with their empathetic side. Males aren't. So the purpose of the men's circle, for example, is to facilitate a conversation and teach the men some meditation. And it started 10, 12 weeks ago. I've had over 30 men come to open up. I've had to learn to wear uncomfortable pants at times. I've shared a lot of things about me. And I'm not knocking those who are psychologists, as soon as I say, I'm not a psychologist, but here's my story, the shoulders go down and they relax, because they're not going to go, here's a 12-week plan and this is what you need to do. So I've been doing this, and some of the conversations have led from things like intimacy. What does that mean to you? To ego. And that's a very, very masculine, and, talking about your job title and then scraping that back going, what about you? What's your job title? What legacy will you give to your kids? One of the men, for example, is a relatively new father. You can't tell somebody who's got a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old to reduce your stress, mate, have 8 hours sleep a night. Your wife will love you. You can't do that. But learn to meditate 4 or 5 times a day, and your stress levels will be hugely different. Also brought to the table that of nutrition and the importance of eating a rainbow every day. But I've taken it even further and said, before you try any type of dietary changes to you, go and see your GP and get a toxicology test to see what's happening in your gut, because you may have too much copper. So you might go to a paleo diet and it won't work for you. You've got to look at your individual needs, and I'm sure you guys are the same. Regardless of where men are in the world, if they've got the materialistic aspect of owning a motor car, and if someone crashes into it, guess what? That's in the mechanic tomorrow. Guys, we need to be more responsible for preventative health. One of the things that's brought up with men over the age of 40 in this country, you're advised to get a prostate examination. And that came up in the circle. The guys were too scared because of their concept that it's the finger up the bum. But they would embrace cancer outcome. And you go, well, it's not actually that. It's a blood test. You do an x-ray. If you need to get that, if that's the worst you're going to endure in your life, toughen up, right? But again, there's a whole lack of education. And again, it's an ego. The other thing that I am doing, I've been doing a lot of presentations, just getting the message over about what men's holistic coaching. And I'm not trying to be something I'm not. I might not be the answer to everybody. You're not broken as a man, but the loneliness, and the funny thing that's coming out as well, actually, the loneliness in men is also the loneliness in women in relationships as well, because they might be married for 10, 20, 30 years, but they don't know how to communicate because they're too close. There should never be any shame for couples, even if they're same sex or if they're in relationships, to go and get help. The mental well-being that you show yourself will be permeated to your kids as well. So that's a kind of message that I've been trying to pushed through for the last 5 months. I'm working on adrenaline, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also writing a book called, the title of it is My Obituary, I'm Not Dead Yet. The story of a 41-year-old getting cancer, your life changes. What do you do? Right? And just the message I want people to go away with is look after your health. Your spiritual wealth is greater than your bank account. And to conclude, one of the key areas about doing this aspect around men, the sad statistic, no matter where you are in the modern world, men between the age of 30 and 50 is the highest suicide rate in the world. And it's something that's swept under the carpet. I cannot remember being at school talking about this. And we have to start teaching our kids meditation, love, light, laughter, connection, and optimism are got to be the way forward. And I've got the jumper.
You got the jumper. Oh,
That's lovely.
It's gorgeous.
Is it Aaron wool?
Aaron popped into my head when I saw it.
Yeah, but if I'll stand up on the chair behind me, and somebody said to me, I showed this girl the other day, and she said, if you wear that, you'll be single for the rest of your life. That's what I mean about the arrows.
Hang on, just let's get back up there. I'll do a screenshot. Hang on. There we go, got them.
And it's bloody warm.
Yeah, like proper wool. It's not as acrylic.
Yeah, I've gone to in my mind going, I'll take it to who would I take it to? A tailor or whatever, but I can't. It's just gorgeous, and hopefully my kids will grab it one day or whatever. But it just brings back a lot of memories for me too.
Mm.
So,
you're going to Australia in the summer.
Yeah, in summer, and even one of the downsides in Sydney, it becomes really humid.
Mm.
So you're lying at night time, you've got the aircon on because it's so humid.
Mm.
But if you need to come out here. It's a beautiful, beautiful place.
Oh, I've been.
Have you ever been? Yeah.
This one hasn't yet.
No.
The only downside is it's a bloody long way away.
Oh, I know. It's painful. The flight. I had a puking, 5 years ago, almost 6-year-old. He puked from the night before we flew all the way to London, all the way to Hong Kong. He perked up at Hong Kong, we had a pizza. What was it? A pizza. And he was fine on the last 2 flights, one from Hong Kong to Cairns and Cairns to Brisbane. Yeah, it's great.
It's actually one of the weird things. Alan Joyce, who's the CEO of Qantas, who's actually originally from Ireland, has said publicly, if you don't have a COVID injection, you will not be allowed on our flights.
Mm.
That's a pretty... And I brought that up in the men's circle. Would you take a COVID injection? And initially, every man said yes. I was really surprised.
Mm.
Especially with, there's no testing on it. There's nothing to say that it's I was going to say it's a real injection, if that makes sense. So I think there's a lot more education that is required. And I think that kids have got to learn. Again, I think next year it's got to be the year of kindness next year, because it's been a shit. I mean, Melbourne in Australia has been locked down for 6 months. They're all going around the bend. I've got a mate who lived out in the countryside of Melbourne, her and her husband and 2 boys, and at the turn of the year moved into the city because they were commuting all the time and the boys were at school in the city, and thought, oh, great, we'll get a nice apartment. And she goes, Martin, we regret it.
Yeah.
But you can't move, right? They've had it really, really tough. And I think that the mental health is something that it's just going to escalate. And hopefully, commercial brain here, hopefully that means that you guys and myself are busy. But it's also, you've got to look at it, you're serving people, you're helping people. And I think that one of the projects I want to do for next year, apart from the night circles, is more of this corporate speaking. I was chatting to some professional speakers the other week. 95% of their income has gone this year. and they've never had a plan B. So they're really struggling because they're used to the big dynamic, 400 people in the crowd and they get everybody going. I don't know if we'll ever get back to that. But to do a Zoom call of 400 people, you can't do it. What's been the biggest? I think the biggest one I've done is 130. And that's too many because your eyes are all over the place. You can't see. I do a regular one on a Sunday morning here. I don't know if I think I might have sent it to the Circle of Optimism. And that's how I got with the Governor General. We had a woman on the weekend who is very friendly with Melissa Gates. I'm going, and she just said it like duck off water. And I'm like, Melissa Gates, fuck. But it's funny, your energy attracts your tribe. And a lot of people, and I guess that's the other key thing, that men get lost in the bullshit of job title, salary, perks, all that kind of stuff, because that's the way that, and women do the same as well. I'm just being sexist, but women are a little bit better at dealing with that balance. Guys don't. It would be interesting to see the stats globally on the consumption of alcohol in 2020.
I always say,
how do you guys coped?
Yeah, we always say that, before COVID, when the recycling guys come collect your bins, we had to sort of convince them we had a party. And then after, during, it was like, we haven't had a party, we're just alcoholics.
It's when the local bottle shop knows you by name, you think, fuck, I need to order online.
You need to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I'll drive to the next suburb. They don't know me. I walked into my bottle shop tonight. I've just come from meditation. Because again, one of the things that has really helped me doing the work that I'm doing, I go once a week to receive meditation because I recognize that I can't do it on my own. And that's been the energy of other people around me. And collectively getting to know other people in my village has been brilliant. And I want to continue doing that. The subject that we had there was the power of now. Just being right now. What are you doing? So it was perfect preparation for this. Right? But I went and grabbed a bottle of wine on the way out, and one of the women went, "Is that for you after your presentation?" I was like, "Shit, yeah." And I actually walked in and said, "I'm a little bit hungover. I've had a kind of weird day, Between the two of us, I think we drank 2 bottles of bubbles and 2 bottles of reds. And it's like, and smoked 20 fags, and I don't smoke." I said earlier. But when you're in that moment and you just go, I was going to smoke a cigar because it was my 50th birthday. And I thought, you stink for 3 days.
It comes out with you, doesn't it?
It comes out and, you're walking around and people going, you smell, right? And it's funny, actually, I got into trouble about 2 weeks ago. I was swimming and I rocked up late. I said, "Sorry, guys, I'm a bit hungover." Now, you don't say that when you're in a group of people swimming because you're putting other people at risk. So I got a picture of a bottle of wine and wrote, "Friday, no. Saturday, yes," and sent it to the swimming coaches. They're like, "Yes, that's what we need to do."
That is hilarious. So should we ask you the quick fire round questions? James, number one.
First. So question number 1. What should everyone see or do at least once in Scotland?
Meditate.
Not battered Mars bars. Deep fried battered Mars bars, no?
I've battered you with one.
Okay, another food related question. What's the best sandwich you've ever had?
Best sandwich? Oh, it has to be a prawn sandwich at Celtic Park, actually. Thinking that I was fantastic in the prawn sandwich brigade.
Wow.
The third question. If you were given £5,000 or Australian dollar equivalent to give the most amount of happiness to the most people, what would you do with it?
I would set up programs to teach young kids about love, meditation, and being kind.
Oh. You win the lottery, we'll fund that for you.
I think that's the way forward, because I think we've missed that generation, because our parents were ex-war, if that makes sense, or just after the war, so they had that legacy. We've had this lost legacy, if that makes sense. If we can teach our kids love, respect, back to the basics of please, thank you, allow the woman to walk on the inside of the pavement type of stuff. Those values, but also just have fun, laugh, belly laugh, learn to activate vitamin S, which is not on the periodic chart, the vitamin for smile, but smile with your whole body. Mm. When you start doing that, your energy flows.
Cool. So if we could get in the time machine and take you back to 18-year-old Martin, what would you say to you over a prawn sandwich at Celtic Park?
I wish that I had learned the benefits of self-care more. I've mentioned meditation, yoga, not being selfish, because I think if I look back on my 18-year-old self, I was very selfish. Learning self-care and will create a better, stronger human being.
Awesome.
Very powerful. I was just thinking what you said earlier with a Scottish accent. You've got selfish and shellfish.
Like I was on a night out, and I don't know if you know this, that there are a couple of phrases that Scottish people struggle with, and it comes down to.
Oh, really?
I would say that it comes down to, remember that program Taggart? Oh, there's been a murder.
Right? Yeah.
Murder, right? But try and get a Scotsman to say, I'm going to make a arse of myself. Burglar alarm.
Burglar alarm. Burglar alarm. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
Burglar alarm.
I mean, it gets stuck in the back of my neck. So all my soccer team, I've been here too long. My football team that I play with, we were having drinks at the end of the season, and they're like, go on, Martin, say burglar alarm. And I was saying it, and the whole floor was laughter. I think one of the key things you forget about yourself as well, you forget how special you are as an individual. You're you. And if every day you can remind yourself of how powerful you are, you'll fly.
Thank you ever so much for all your wisdom, Martin.
Oh, it's been a pleasure on this hot and sticky, and my red wine is waiting over there for me.
Oh, bless you. Yes, it's chilly. It's chilly in Newcastle. Let's just say that. So if anybody wants to get in touch with Martin, James?
You mentioned you could be found on Facebook or LinkedIn, and your email address is martinegillespie70@gmail.com, which will, of course, put in all the show notes to find you.
Well, hopefully the other key thing, by the time that we're putting this out, my website will be up and running as well. So I'll give you that link to it.
Yes, please. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I also meant to mention the name of my company is Gem Wellness Warriors, which is for growth, empathy, and mindset.
Love it.
It's also my initials backwards, so it's meant to be.
Wow. What's your middle name?
Edward.
You've said that one before, haven't you?
You can understand why I'm divorced, don't you?
Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Listen, guys, I'll speak to you before Christmas, but thanks for having so much fun with me.
No worries.
Loved it.
Thanks everyone for listening. Check out all the show notes at inspirationnorth.com. Join us again for the next episode, when we'll be chatting to another inspirational person. If you like this, subscribe and tell your friends. If you didn't like this, subscribe anyway and tell everybody.